And all of that is to kind of shame us into feeling inadequate or weak or less than if we say, that's actually a bit too much for me right now. And that is one of the stigmas that needs to be broken. It needs to be broken. We cannot feel ashamed about being overwhelmed or being overworked or having too much put on our plate. And we all know that the more capable you are and the more, people pleasing and perfectionist you are, the more people heap on your plate, the more you take, because you are not willing to say, I'm not Wonder Woman.
Why is it that so many smart, caring, capable people find themselves on a path of deteriorating mental health? They try to manage on their own for far too long, but gradually and then suddenly they find themselves in a full-blown mental health crisis. And what would change for you if you could recognise those early warning signs in yourself or someone you love before it gets to that point? I'm Ros Lindsay. I'm the host of the Wellness Nurse podcast. I'm a registered nurse with a Masters of Public Health, and I am passionate about prevention and helping you to reduce your risk of lifestyle-related chronic diseases so that you can live a healthier life for longer. And that absolutely includes looking after your mental health, not just your physical health. Today, we are talking about worsening depression and anxiety and how to notice those early warning signs that your mental health is declining long before you're in a full-blown crisis. We're going to look at those subtle changes that occur in your sleep, in your mood, energy, and coping mechanisms that are easy to dismiss when you are busy with work, your family, and caring for everyone else. The purpose of this conversation today is primarily to let you know that you are not alone and to encourage you to let someone know how you're feeling and to reach out to someone early. Before we go any further, I want to offer a content warning. In this episode, we'll be talking about depression and anxiety and some very difficult experiences, including thoughts about not wanting to be here. So please take care of yourself as you listen. If you're in Australia and need immediate support, you can call Lifeline on 13 11 14 or 000 in an emergency. And if you're listening from elsewhere, please contact your local crisis service or emergency number. Today, we are recording this episode in two places, on Turrbal and Gubbi Gubbi country and on Darkinjung country on the New South Wales Central Coast. We pay our respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people listening today. So everything we talk about on this podcast is for general education and for your support, and it's never a replacement for personalised medical care. Joining me today is Julie Goodwin, one of the nation's favourite home cooks. Julie became a household name back in 2009 when she was crowned Australia's first ever MasterChef. And since then, she's published best-selling cookbooks, she's cooked on national television, hosted breakfast radio, run her own cooking school, and performed live shows around the country. In recent years, she has also begun speaking very openly about her own mental health journey. In her memoir, which is called Your Time Starts Now, she shares both the highs of fame and the lows of depression, anxiety, and acute mental health care, along with her ongoing journey of recovery and hope. Julie now works with organisations like Beyond Blue, using her lived experience to spark honest conversations and reduce the stigma around getting help. And today she's here to share that journey in the hope it might help you or someone you love reach out for support when you need it most. Julie, thank you so much for joining us here for a conversation on the Wellness Nurse podcast.
An absolute pleasure, Roz. Thank you for having me.
Julie, I would love to start with where you are now because it gives people hope. For someone who can't imagine feeling better yet, what does an ordinary, pretty good day look for you now in terms of how you look after your mind and your body?
It's really timely, actually, Roz, that you asked me that question, because just yesterday I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognise, and it's a lady that I met in the midst of the pandemic. It was in between lockdowns and I was on a road trip, and I actually met with some strangers that I had met online during some meetings that I was doing online, and she had kept my number, and she rang me yesterday morning to say, I'm in a psych ward and I never saw myself here. And she said, I've read some of your story and I just want to know, is it going to be okay? How are you? What's going on? Give me some hope. That's literally what she rang me for. And I hadn't spoken to this lady since 2021. And so I was able to sort of say to her, life is really good and, hold on, just hold on, because what comes out of it, the other side, life is beautiful. It is joyful. The privilege of breaking all the way down is that you get to build your life all the way back up from scratch, and make decisions about what belongs in it and what doesn't, what your days should look like and what they shouldn't look like. So I am still and will forever be crafting my life day by day and decision by decision, but I'm doing it in such an informed way that, I wake up in the morning with things to look forward to instead of things to dread. And so that is a lovely place to be.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And the way that you describe breaking down as a privilege, in a sense, because you can start crafting that. It is a privilege, but an incredibly painful journey along the way too.
Well, that's just it, Roz. And that, you're passionate about prevention and I am too. What I want by speaking to this is for people to start crafting that life for themselves without having to go all the way to the bottom of that hole. We can make those decisions without it almost being the end of us,
That's it.
Start making those decisions before you get all the way there. That's my purpose now too.
That is amazing. That just makes my heart sing, because there's just so much that we can do. And I think of, the person that's listening, they might be feeling good today or okay or not okay or feeling really low or feeling in despair. And if we can recognise when we're feeling up here or we're dropping a little bit and we take action in those times, we can maintain that status quo, or we can bring ourselves up, we can reach for help in a timely manner, and it can prevent that spiral. So that is just really reassuring to hear that that's your story now too.
Yep. That's what I've said that too over and over, is that once you're at the bottom of the well, it's hard to see a toehold. You can see that tiny speck of light, and you actually, logically, we all know what we have to do to climb out of it. We've heard it before, but, perhaps those things haven't landed with us, but you can't figure out how to get started. You know what you have to do, you just can't do it.
That's right.
My hope, my dream, my goal is that people, grab hold of the help that's available before you're at the bottom of the well, and illness takes over and the voices are not rational anymore, and there's nothing to be found down there. It's really important to recognise when you're in the bucket and you're starting to head down. So that's what it's all about. And had I paid attention to those earlier signs and symptoms, I would not have ended up, in the mess, the terrible mess I ended up in.
Well, there was a time when you were doing a lot, and I get the feeling you are again or still doing a lot, but you were doing radio, you were writing, running a cooking school, helping with the family business. Your husband has a business as well, on top of raising 3 boys, and days off were as rare as hen's teeth. And you've written in your memoir about leaving the studio and the smile just dropping off your face. And why do you think so many of us, you included, feel such pressure to keep that smile on and to keep performing, even when we're not okay? And what did that cost you personally?
I think, for anyone who's sort of a bit overwhelmed, overworked, struggling, we do put pressure on ourselves to mask that. And I think there's a rainbow of reasons for that. I think partially because you don't want to worry the people that you love. You don't have an answer for people who say what's wrong. So you pretend there's nothing wrong. I think that especially for women my age, I think there's some generational stuff going on there that, I was raised by boomers, right? I'm a Gen X. I was raised by boomers who was raised by the silent generation, and those people are stoic, man. My nan she was brought up through the war, through the Depression. She raised her kids with that, there's always someone worse off than you. You've got to be grateful. You've got to pick yourself up, dust yourself off. You've got to keep going, chin up, put a good face on it, put on a happy face, fake it till you make it. We've got so many phrases for suck it up, princess, first world problems, all of that stuff. And all of that is to kind of shame us into feeling inadequate or weak or less than if we say, that's actually a bit too much for me right now. And that is one of the stigmas that needs to be broken. It needs to be broken. We cannot feel ashamed about being overwhelmed or being overworked or having too much put on our plate. And we all know that the more capable you are and the more people-pleasing and perfectionist you are, the more people heap on your plate, the more you take, because you are not willing to say, I'm not Wonder Woman. Because you want to be Wonder Woman, because we're told we have to be Wonder Woman or Wonder Man. This is gendered in that I think we suffer differently with how we bring ourselves to the brink, but it's not gendered in that men and women both experience this stuff and experience it in ways that are life-threatening. So, I don't want to say this is just a woman's problem. It's really not, but I think that we have different approaches to life that bring us undone. Yeah. And I think that for women, it's very much that we've got to hold things together for the family. We've got to carry everything for the family. We often carry everything in our workplaces. And, that whole idea of if you want something done, give it to a busy person, cut it out. The busy person is busy because they can't say no. Stop it. Stop burdening them with more stuff. If you want something done,
true.
Go do it.
Yes, go do it yourself. Exactly. And I think for busy women, you talk about the differences in gender. I think for women particularly, there is additionally that striving to show that we are just as good as the man or whatever it is. But we can, like a moth to a flame, we go. There's another opportunity to shine and we will go for it. And when we are already... Yeah, it's punishing.
It's punishing.
Yeah.
It's deadly. It's deadly, and we've got to stop the language around it. We've got to stop that whole, could be worse. Of course it could be worse. There's always someone in a worse position, but we have to acknowledge that unless we're filling our own cup up a little bit, we can't be helpful to people in those positions. And also what I have to do is say all the more how every day is precious and important. So it has to be filled with things that are precious and important, not things that are performative, not things to make anyone else think a certain way about me, just things that are precious and important. But, we all just get this one life, So what I can say to you is if you have declining mental health, there's a toolkit of things that you can do that may save your life.
Absolutely.
Please take this toolkit. Please apply these tools.
There are so many free resources that Australia provides, and I'll do a blog, so I'll link in the show notes to a blog that will outline all the different free resources that are available to you in every state and territory of Australia. So please avail yourself of that. Lifeline is at the top of that list, really, and Beyond Blue, the Black Dog Institute, anyone that you gravitate, you can reach out to them. And there's a whole lot of resources on their websites, really practical, that might just meet you where you're at today.
The reality is that sometimes you find people in a place, and I found myself in a place where you can't actually take advantage of those resources and you can't use the tools in your toolkit because you're so depleted. There's really nothing left. And, you know, when that illness steps in, and we're talking critical stage, when that illness takes over and the voices come from there and nowhere rational, it can be an impossibility to find those resources or to even lift your hand up to pick up your telephone and make that phone call, you know, or the will to do it or the want to even help yourself can be gone. So, you know, again, this is where recognising those signs and symptoms while you still have the strength or the will or any modicum of a voice inside your head that wants out of that scenario, you know, that wants to get better, that knows that they need help, then that's the time to act before it's all, you know, critically dangerous.
Julie, one of the questions I have flowing through my mind is that, do you think the narrative of reaching out for an ambulance or going to the hospital when you are mentally unwell is equally as loud as it is for when we've got a physical illness?
There's a terrible disconnect between mental health and physical health. I don't understand it. It's as though not just people and our perception, but the whole system is set up as though our brain is walking around on a stick separate to our body. That ain't it. It's all connected. Our physical health impacts our mental health. You ask anyone with a chronic physical disease how their mental health is, and I guarantee you it's impacted by that physical disease. And you ask anyone with a chronic mental illness how that impacts your physicality and your ability to move and to do the things you need to do for your body. It's all intertwined. It is inextricably intertwined. But for some reason, there's a lot of stigma around saying it's this organ that needs help, not my heart or my lungs or my liver or my kidneys or my gut or my broken leg, you know, or my torn tendon or my, you know, it's this organ here. It's still part of your body, but it's this organ here. We suddenly can't bring ourselves to ask for help for it. And we have to just connect everything back up, you know. And even, again, just that generational reluctance to ask for help. My parents are so reluctant to ask for help. Even when things, you know, it might be a chest pain or a slurred speech and it's like, call an ambulance. We'll sleep on it and see what happens. It's like banging your head against a brick wall. And what happens if you don't wake up? You know, and the only way I can get them to do it is that I've still, very fortunate for me, got both of my parents, and I can say, well, what happens if she doesn't wake up? What happens if he doesn't wake up? How are you going to feel that you didn't call an ambulance? Oh, well, yeah. Never for themselves, but because they're still madly in love with each other, I can blackmail them like that. But we just got to let go of that idea that there's some kind of inherent weakness in asking for any kind of help. But there's so much stigma around the mental health thing. And I actually didn't realise, you know, Ros, and especially if you work in the space that you do, you see all this, you know, ads on TV, the Are You OK Day, the corporate responsibility that's being built in surrounding mental health sick leave, you know, compassionate leave, all this sort of stuff that seems to be being built into the system to help. But it hasn't erased the stigma anywhere near as much as I thought it had. And I didn't know it until I spoke out publicly about my own story. part of the reason I did that was because I found myself in a psychiatric unit, and I was with all these people who, because, you don't know what that's going to be like when you are told you need to go there. And really the only things that I ever experienced about psych wards were what I'd seen in the movies, So I really had no idea what to expect. I thought I was going to prison. It is kind of a prison in a way. I didn't know what to expect of the other patients in there. And you know what? They were all just like me. They're all just like me. We all had different things going on, but really at the heart of it, we're all pretty much the same. We're all unwell and doing what we can to get better. And we're doing that for ourselves, but mainly because when you're in that situation, you don't like yourself very much, mainly for the people that love us, to try and alleviate some of their pain and their concern around us and, the messes that we've, supposedly made of our lives. And what I saw in all the people around me was just so much shame about the fact that they were there or that they were back there and that, that they hadn't managed to fix themselves and that they, needed this help. And that just seemed so wrong to me. And I would be saying to all these other people, why are you so hard on yourself? Aren't you here trying to make yourself better? This is grace that I did not extend to myself, by the way. But I was able to extend it to every other person in there. And I just thought, that's not right. It's not right to loathe yourself because you need some help. It's just not right. And so, and ever since I've been talking about it, I had a girl come up to me. She would have been in her early 30s. And she said, I went into a mental hospital when I was 19 years old. And you're the first person I've ever told. She said, no one ever talks about it. No one ever talks about it. And I've carried a lot of shame with me for all those years. You're the first person outside my family that knows about it. And it's the first time I felt able to say it out loud. It's hospital,
It's hospital. It's acute care when an organ is failing, when there is chemical imbalance, when we are unwell.
Exactly.
I think doing what you are doing, a person like you that has a platform that is able and willing to be vulnerable and to be open and honest and to share your experience is piece by piece removing some of that stigma. I think.
Well, I hope so. I hope so because early intervention, the ability to say things out loud that we haven't been allowed to say out loud, that's where other people might go, well, maybe you don't have to end up in that situation and so unwell if you don't get overloaded in the first place, or if you can recognise that there's maybe some stuff that you need to work out as to why you are a perfectionist or why you constantly need people's approval and you're a people pleaser and you nearly work yourself into a state because you cannot let anybody down. I can't let anybody down. Just learning how to say no and learning how to understand that actually sometimes saying no isn't letting somebody down, and actually asking for a hand here and there can actually be the help that somebody else needs because you're showing some faith in somebody else's ability and you're offering somebody else an opportunity to achieve something and to shine and to actually feel useful instead of you thinking you're the only person who can possibly achieve the things that need to be achieved. Along with that perfectionism, that people-pleasing, there's a little sense of, well, I'm the only one who's ever going to do this right, isn't there? We've got to let go of that. We're not the only person who can do things right. We've got to accept that there are other capable people around us, and sometimes all we need to do is ask. And it's not the big ask we thought it was going to be. It's like, yeah, sure, no problem. I was going that way anyway. No worries. Or actually, amazing. I've been busting to give that a go. I'd love to do that. We build things up in our heads to a degree that we don't need to a lot of the time.
That's so true and so beautifully articulated. I'm wondering, for the person listening, what could it be today that you actually reach out to somebody for? Could you ask them something today that you just need a little help with? There is no shame in asking for help, and there's a challenge.
I've got a perfectly pragmatic husband, so I'm very lucky. He's like this voice of reason that steps in when I need it. And so sometimes I channel him when he's not even there. And one of the very pragmatic things he says to me, okay, so what of those things that's worrying you do you have control over, and what don't you have control over? Okay, so the things you don't have control over, let's forget about those, shall we? It's so annoying. But then the other thing that he does very, very well, and it's because he's very pragmatic, and I think that there are, and again, you know, men can be like this. What are the things we need to do to sort this out? He'll say, you know, if I'm getting a bit heightened, and I still do, and my pathway, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, my pathway is ongoing, and I constantly have to keep coming back to the basics and reminding myself of what I need to do, and, you know, who's driving the bus at the moment, because I'm a bit out there at the moment, you know. So if I get a bit heightened, a bit anxious, if symptoms are starting to creep in, the mental and the physical symptoms are starting to creep in, which they do, he will say to me, tell me what's on your list for today. And I'll tell him, and he'll say, which of those are 100% necessary? And you know what? Sometimes there's hardly anything on there that is actually, when we're talking brass tacks, strictly necessary. And sometimes it's even the things that you thought you could never drop off your list, that you actually have to drop off your list. And, you know, one of the most important things in my life right now is I love to pick up my granddaughter from preschool. She is the most important thing for me. Time with her, top of my list. But if I'm having a day or a moment, then it's not outside the realm of possibility for me to say, well, actually, babe, what's your day look like? Could you come home a bit early and be the one to pick her up? Or say to my son or my daughter-in-law, can we switch days this week? And I'll get her another day, you know. So even though that is one of the most crucial, beautiful, my favourite thing to do, and one of the most important things that I do, I can still shuffle that, you know. So let alone, well, I was gonna bake a dessert tonight because I haven't tested that recipe. I was gonna, you know, I really wanted to get all the washing done. I have to do my column, but, you know, the deadline's not for another week. I have to, you know, all the things that just start freaking me out. If I actually look at the list of what needs to happen today, and he'll say, so can you build in a hot bath and a nap after lunch? I'm like, yeah,
what? Who is this man?
I know. Yes, but, you know, so you can channel that voice. He doesn't have to be there. And it's like when my computer breaks down and I ring him up because he's an IT consultant, and before I even get the question out, I'll say to him, oh, babe, I'm having a problem. Don't worry, I'll turn it off and turn it on again. And I hang up on him. And I turn it off and turn it on again. And it comes. Sometimes you're going to turn your brain off and turn it on again and go, what actually is necessary? What am I flogging myself with that I don't need to flog myself with? You know, and that's just a little, very super practical thing that you can do.
Oh, what an amazing analogy that is. Just to stop the brain, turn it off, turn it on again. Let's see where we're at. What do we have to do today? What's necessary? What can we drop?
Yeah. Yep, that's a simple one. And again, you know, you do have to be at a point in your life where you can logic that out. Yes. So that's quite different to that down the bottom of the well. You know, perhaps what we can do is build that bridge between those practical, simple things that we can do when we're quite well, as opposed to and those things that might stop us going to the bottom of the well, as opposed to the things that we need to recognise are that descent and how we haul ourselves out once we're down there.
Let's talk about what are those changes that are happening gradually. What do you recognise when you feel that slide, that, you know, there's a shift in the way that you're feeling? What are some of the small gradual changes in your mood, in your body, or in your behaviour that you brushed off at the time?
Well, look, I'm a great person to ask that, because I'm a very, very obstinate and obstinately ignored all of them. And so I've got the whole range for you, right from the very, very first signs all the way to the, you know, I think it might have been something Oprah said. I'm going to paraphrase, and I think it was Oprah, I might be wrong, but at first it's a whisper, and then it's a yell, and then it's just a Mack truck, or it's a 2x4 across the head or something. So I've got the whole range because I steadfastly refused to acknowledge any sign or symptom that things were declining because, you know, I'm strong, I'm capable, we don't do that, I'm the luckiest person in the world, what have I got to ever be depressed about? And I actually resisted diagnosis of depression for most of my life. I told off an antenatal nurse. You know, I had depression after I had my first baby. I've gone through periods of it my whole life, and I have fought against that diagnosis my whole life because how dare you say that about me? I am not a depressed person. I'm a happy person. I'm an optimist. I'm strong. I'm capable. Don't you dare challenge my idea of who I am with that dreadful word. It'll just become this self-fulfilling, self-pitying prophecies. Just so you understand, that's where I came from, right? I ain't there now, baby, because it's a clinical diagnosis. It's not a moral judgment. So let's take the moral judgment out of the whole thing, and let me tell you the signs and symptoms that I experienced. So first of all, it sounds obvious, but sadness, crying at the drop of a hat, and with that sort of heaviness of heart, you know, I found myself hyper emotional. So the slightest thing could make me cry. And sometimes irrationally. It would seem irrational, but there it was. And I'm a kind of a teary person, so that crept in without me noticing. And then sometimes I would just think, this is ridiculous, I'm just crying way too much. And with that comes then a weariness for me. And of course, I'm describing my own signs and symptoms. What I would say to anybody listening is you might recognise these, or you might say, you know what, that doesn't resonate, but something else has changed in me that I would like to get curious about. And that to me is one of the most important phrases in this whole topic of conversation is just get curious. If you notice a change, if more people than usual are saying, are you okay? You seem tired, you seem stressed, have you got too much on? Don't be irritated, get curious about it. And even ask them, is there a reason you're asking me that? Is there something you've noticed? Get curious. So fatigue is a big one for me. And when I'm naturally fatigued, if I feel like I'm getting enough sleep, but I still want to have a nap at 10 o'clock in the morning, or, you know, I'm really dragging my feet by lunchtime, that's a sign for me that that something's whirring away in the background that probably should be cooled off a bit. So those are my first signs and symptoms. Definitely having to be conscious about the expression on my face was something that became quite physical for me. Back when things started to go downhill very quickly for me, I was working on the radio. So that's a great litmus test for how you're doing, because from 6 till 9 in the morning, I had to get up. My alarm went off at 4 o'clock in the morning, which meant I had to go to bed quite early to get the sleep in that I needed. But I had irritable bowel, and like I did, but it all came from stress. So these symptoms became so physical. I've got, you know, some funny stories about the guts issue because that became so severe and so chronic that I really couldn't move far from a bathroom for periods of time. It all became so serious that I actually thought that I was dying. And that nobody could figure out what it was that was killing me. And unfortunately, because, you know, nobody could figure out what was wrong, and all these random, small, insignificant to the doctors things, it's probably a low-grade virus, it's probably a low-grade infection, there's nothing showing up in your bloods, you know. I medicated myself. So the thing that slowed my head down and stopped me from feeling useless and actually allowed me to go to sleep was to have a drink of wine at night. And, you know, while I was working on the radio, I didn't drink during the week because it was just, you just can't get up at 4 o'clock in the morning if you've had a drink during the week. But once I stopped doing the radio, it was on for young and old, and it just got out of control, you know. So it was a terrible downward spiral. And by the time I actually did end up accepting a diagnosis of depression because it was just unavoidable at that stage. I couldn't stop crying. Getting myself to work every day was just the most gargantuan effort. I did it though. I did it. So there are some people for whom this manifests in a physicality, and I felt like I was going around in the world with wet blankets over my shoulders. You know, the weight of all my limbs was so enormous. Lifting my hand was an effort that it's hard to describe other than that. Like I was in wet sand, or I had wet woolen blankets draped over me. And I know that for some people they can't get out of bed. I could get out of bed, but that's how I moved through the world. It was like being in syrup. And I was able to do what I had to do and show up how I had to show up for those bursts of time. But by the time I got home, I had nothing for my family. I couldn't smile. I had nothing for them. And these are the people I love most in the whole world, for whom I would give anything at all. But I was giving everything I had to my work and to the facade that everything was okay. So, yeah, the mask fell off my face and it cracked in 1,000 pieces on the floor, and I just thought, I'm no good to anybody. I'm no good to anybody. Look how sick I am. Look how useless I am. You know, the illness really took over my thoughts, and my thoughts very much became, I am just such a burden. I'm such a burden. And this is me at the bottom of the well now. Look at these people that I love. Look at the worry that I'm causing them. Look at the pain that I'm causing them. How much better would they be if I just fuck? And that's where I found myself.
And you mentioned, you know, when we hear the whispers, we can pay attention then. And when we can hear the messages coming a little bit louder, you know, you went from, I feel sad, I feel fatigued, you know, to the physical symptoms starting to show up, to that complete despair and the loss of rational thought, really, and the entry of those dreadful, dreadful thoughts. I'm so sorry to hear your story, to hear the pain of that, and that you are repeating that story again. The reason that you are doing that is, again, for the person that's listening, and if you are recognizing, if you're identifying any of those early whispers, that, dear God, is the time to move and pay attention.
This is a life-threatening illness. It is a deadly illness, and it claims lives every day in this country, far too many of them, a greater proportion than is fathomable. It is as serious as any other illness, and it needs to be taken seriously. And if you had the early symptoms of anything else, my God, you would run for the help that you need. Just treat it the same way.
Yeah,
treat
absolutely.
it the same way. Caught early, you can turn it around.
That's it.
It is a chronic condition. It can be a chronic condition, but the treatment, doable. You know, the treatment makes you well. And the treatment will differ from person to person. But the things that you have to do to manage depression and to manage anxiety will improve your life in ways that you can't even imagine, in ways that for me, the treatment that I use, the tools in my toolkit and the things that I do have given me a lease on life that I could not fathom back then. I could not even imagine when I was sick. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for everything that I've gone through, because without it, I wouldn't be where I am, you know. And where I am is so beautiful. It's so beautiful. I am blessed beyond my wildest dream, you know.
Wow.
I wouldn't swap my life for anything. Not for anything. I wouldn't swap it for a 10-year younger me. I wouldn't swap it for a billionaire. I wouldn't swap it for anything in the world because I am blessed, and my days are beautiful and I've got people around me. I'm so lucky to have the people around me that I do. And I'm so lucky to now have the perspective that I do. And a lot of the reason for that is that I've actually gotten rid of some of those deeply conditioned voices that tell me that if I do something for myself that I'm selfish. That if I exercise self-care, that I'm taking something away from somebody else. Because now what I know is that if I don't exercise self-care, I'm going to take myself away from the people that I love. And you know what I know now? I'm useful to them. I'm loved by them. I am needed by them. I am valued by them. And I add to their lives. I contribute to their lives.
How did you silence the other voices or make them quieter? Because sometimes, on a bad day, sometimes those voices can creep in again. What would that look like for you?
Look, I would say, number one, therapy. I had to really, and I know because I've got friends like this who have their own issues who are like, I don't see the point in going into the past and digging all that up. And for me, that's been crucial, actually, to understand why, what brought me to this idea that everybody has to love me, that if I let somebody down, that the world's going to fall apart. What made me think that I have to do everything perfectly or I'll be left on my own? What made me think that if I don't hold everything together with sheer will and my little fingernails, that everything's going to fly apart? I had to go back, way back, and uncover and discover what little parts of me were inside holding on to these beliefs that were formed when I was too little to understand any better. When I thought that I had to hold things together, when I thought that, being a shiny little overachieving perfectionist was the way to be loved. I had to unlearn a lot of that stuff, and I had to figure out that, all those lessons that I learned, they've brought me to where I am. They've brought me to where I am, so I can't be sad about anything that's happened. I just have to understand its place in my life now and why I have these beliefs. So I think that learning where this stuff comes from can really, really help, because now when those voices come in, and oh my God, they do sometimes like an absolute freight train. If I do something stupid, like objectively stupid, which I still do, it's really easy for those voices that we don't like to just go, you absolute idiot, you are such a loser, you're such an idiot, you're such a, why do you ruin everything? That's a big one for me. Why do you ruin everything? And that, my God, what a thing to say. I don't ruin everything, but I can recognise where that voice comes from, and I can say, okay, honey, have a little seat. It's okay. It's okay. We don't ruin everything. We have certainly made a mess of that particular thing, but we have the resources to sort it out. We have the resources. We're a grown-ass adult now, and we are 55. So take a chill pill. It's all going to be fine. And in the context of this day, this week, this year, this life, this planet, this universe, this is nothing. It's nothing. It's fine. So silencing those voices, you can't just say, shh, and there's a lot of it, and you will know this, a lot of cognitive behavioural therapy where you take a bad thought and you put it in a bubble and you let it float away. That does rely on you noticing your thoughts constantly. That can get exhausting. So I would say talk to somebody, a professional, someone with no skin in your particular game, right? Yeah. Not a family member. They've all got their own baggage. They've all got their own reasons for saying to you what they say to you. Go and talk to a counsellor, a professional, and start to understand why those thoughts appear in the first place. And that will really help you to put it on a leaf and let it float down a stream the way that cognitive behavioural therapy tells you that you should do. So that's one, and that's a really big one.
It is a big one, and it's something that there's a lot of people living day to day, and they have had trauma in their lives, and they may not even acknowledge it or remember it, but it is showing up in a variety of ways. And I would encourage people to seek that professional help with a psychologist. Start with your GP, go from there.
Yeah.
Because it does impact so many areas of our lives. If there is that trauma that has not been addressed, and there is hope at the other side of that.
Yeah. And trauma it's a funny word, because often people think the word trauma and they think it must be one catastrophic event. But that's actually, it's a much broader definition of trauma as it applies to mental health. And you may not even know that you've been through a trauma or a complex trauma, which is sort of something that's ongoing, that's impacted you. That's definitely one of the big ticket items that I would recommend. Obviously, there's a chemical thing going on for a lot of people when it comes to their mental health. I'm on medication, and I had to try a couple of different ones. There are some factions, out there in the world, particularly the online world, that will shame you for seeking medication help. But, people wouldn't shame you if you were taking blood pressure medication. They wouldn't shame you if you were taking, for so many other kinds of critical illness. So don't allow yourself to be shamed for that either. You've got to do what you've got to do. My medication is working for me, and my God, while I'm on the equilibrium that I'm on, I ain't changing a thing, because I'm frightened that if I do that, I might start down that slope again, and I don't want to. And then there's sort of a whole bevy of other things that can be done. But, and again, I wanting to qualify this, Ros, because I think it's important that when I say the things that have helped me, first of all, everyone's going to have a different range of stuff that helps them. Second of all, you can only do what you can do. So the things that I can do, partially I can do because I am very privileged to have the resources. Okay, so I'm privileged to have the resources to go and see a psychologist. That is expensive for a lot of people. So for some people, it's a case of finding the available resources that don't cost money. Okay, and I wish that there were more of those available, and I will advocate for that as long as I breathe, because I think we all should have access to counselling.
Absolutely.
Of the type that suits us. And there are lots of different kinds of counselling, lots of different models of psychology and psychotherapy and all of those sorts of things. We should all have access to that. And there are resources. Look for them, find them, get someone to help you find them. And I'm also very privileged in the sense that I can do things for myself now because I no longer have 3 babies under 3 years of age and a husband that works and commutes to Sydney. For a period of time, and one of my darkest periods of my life, which still hurts me to say because my children being young was also one of the most beautiful periods of my life. But those things can walk hand in hand. That some of the darkest times of my life, I was getting up before dawn because that's when they were getting up. And I was on the hop until my husband got home at 7 o'clock at night. I was on my own. I had no car. I had no family. I had no friends living near me. I was alone with 3 children under 3 years of age.
It's full on.
Well, when was I going to go for a 20-minute walk, Ros? Some nights Mick would get home and I'd still be in my pyjamas and busting for the toilet because you cannot leave toddlers unsupervised. So I understand now that my boys are grown and that I'm a grandparent, so I don't have primary. And prior to my parents needing more care than what I need to give them, or needing any kind of care, they live on the South Coast, they're independent. So I'm in a golden era where I actually get to say, what does my day look like? When can I fit in those things? Also privileged to have a flexible work life. So I understand, and I would never say all you have to do is a 20-minute walk, because for some people that is not bloody possible, and we need to find ways around that for those people, and that might involve asking for some help. So it's different for everybody. But for me, it's really important now that I do move. Exercise is a really important part of my toolkit. Time in nature, getting outdoors, getting sunshine on my face, even on days where there's no plan to do that. Walking outside into the backyard, out onto the front street, getting sunshine on my face and fresh air in my lungs, that's really important. Meditation. So I put on my headphones when I go to bed at night, and there's lots and lots of free resources for meditation. I go to sleep to a meditation, and that really helps you sleep. And I would say, if you've got to pick one thing to start with, sort that out first, because if you aren't sleeping well, everything is harder. Everything's harder, and I don't care what your mental health is like. If your sleep is not good, your mental health will suffer. If your sleep is not good, your physical health will suffer. If your sleep is not good, you will have more fatigue than you need to deal with, and your resources will be depleted. There are lots and lots of things we can do. And I tell you, I hate the phrase sleep hygiene. It's a shocking phrase. When I went into the psych ward, when I went into a mental hospital, one of the first classes I had to go to was called sleep hygiene. And I was disgusted. I'm like, I don't need to be told how to wash my face and brush my teeth. Get out of here. Like, it sounded gross to me. Sleep hygiene. I'm hygienic. Get lost. So it's a terrible term for what really means just routine. And I've gone one step further, and instead of routine, I call it ritual, because I actually really love the part of my day where I stretch and say, I'm going to go get ready for bed. And it's my ritual. And of course, the hygiene part of it's there, where I clean my skin and I clean my teeth. I fold my things and put them away. I make sure my room is a beautiful environment. I take my medicine. That's a bedtime thing for me. I settle into my beautiful bed. God, I love going to bed. I put my meditation on. I choose something nice. I choose whatever. I don't have the same one every night. I did for a long time, and that was a beautiful part of my ritual. But I choose wherever the mood takes me now. I say, well, I feel like, a heart coherence meditation tonight, or I feel like, a muscle relaxant one tonight, or I just feel like some affirmations, or whatever it is. I just find it, put it on, I snuggle in, I've got my beautiful little bedside lamp, and I do the things that I need to do. So there's lots and lots of things that you can do to improve your sleep, whether it's, rubbing something on your feet, or putting on a beautiful aromatherapy, or music, or whatever it is. There are lots of ways to. And of course, I read a really funny meme that was like, God, I'd do anything to get a solid 8 hours of sleep. And somebody says, why don't you go to bed 8 hours before you have to get up? And they go, oh, I'm not doing that.
That's right. But that they would do anything.
I'd do anything for 8 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
Would you though? Would you really? Because the first thing is to go to bed 8 hours before you have to be up. So that, sort that, and a lot of other things will fall into place. And again, if you are caring for someone, if you are a shift worker, if you have toddlers, it ain't on for you. It's not going to happen for you. So we've got to find workarounds that help support you the best way that we can in the life circumstances that you find yourself. There are things that you don't have a choice about. Being a parent to your babies is one of those things. But there are a lot more things that we have a choice about than what we acknowledge. And that's another thing. So recognising what is too much for you, finding the things in your day that give you purpose instead of just the things that you feel you have to do to get by. Again, I recognise that I'm talking from a position of, my house isn't going to be taken away from me if I don't get up, commute to Sydney, work 8 hours for a boss I hate, So I am very lucky, and I know that most people are in that situation. And don't get me wrong, I got to work, but I do have choices around my work. But here's the thing. When I was working on the radio, when I had my cooking school, those were my jobs. I didn't think I had a choice, because it was my name on the radio show. It was my name on the cooking school door. I gave up the radio because that lifestyle, that 4 a.m. start, that I recognised that was part of what was grinding me down. I kept the cooking school going for another little while, a couple of years, and I was becoming ill again. It was bringing me down again because I just couldn't keep up with everything. And I found myself in a circumstance where, it was post-COVID. All my beautiful hospitality team had to go find work in more forgiving sectors where they had more work. My second in charge had a beautiful little baby and had to leave me. And my son, who also worked for me, got his dream job in television. So he was working in my office. And I found myself alone in this business. And I remember saying to my psychologist, Heather, I am not coping. I was, and it wasn't that the business was doing badly. The business was doing too well for me to handle on my own. And I said to her, I'm feeling it all coming back. I said, actually, the words I said were, I can see the doors to the hospital from where I stand. And she said, you have to shut it down. And I said, I can't afford to. I can't afford to shut it down. And she said to me, how much will your funeral cost?
Oh, dear.
And that was a wake-up call. And she said to me, I said, because some of the words I used were, I don't have a choice. And she said, everything's a choice. Some of them are just hard. So I made the choice and I shut my business. And I remember talking about that it was a conference of people in the financial sector, and one lady said to me, but I don't have a choice. If my boss comes to me at 5 p.m. with a stack of files and I've decided that my boundaries, we talk a lot about boundaries at these things, my boundaries are that I'm leaving at 5 o'clock because I've got to get home to my family, and that's more important to me than pleasing my boss. And he comes at 10 to 5 with a stack of files and says, you have to finish this before you go home. I don't have a choice. Well, you do.
You do.
It's going to have a consequence. And you've got to decide what consequences you want to bear. Is the consequence that your family's going to miss out? Is the consequence that your mental health's going to fall apart? Is the consequence that you're going to lose your job? If the consequence is that you're going to lose your job, then think about the consequences of that. Will you find another job? What are the stressors that will bring you? Everything is a choice. And at the end of that conference, I had two women come up to me and they were quite excited. And they said, guess what? And I said, what? And they went, we're going to quit. Oh, my God. don't put that on me. But, it's just, it
incredible.
Feels like we don't have a choice. We do have a choice. And sometimes that choice would be untenable, and it would mean we're going to lose our home, we're going to lose, and so I have to, but if you recognise that I am making the choice to stay in this job because that is preferable to the alternative. But sometimes you might objectively look at that choice and say, well, I actually do have some choices that I can make here. And what I would say to you is that sometimes when you hold your boundaries, the choice isn't what you think it's going to be. It mightn't be that you lose your job. It might be, you know what, I've made a commitment that I'm leaving at 5 o'clock and I need you to bring these. So what I'm going to say to you, my dear employer, is that I'll be able to have that to you by mid-morning tomorrow, but I am unable to get that done tonight. And you know what might happen? It might not be you're fired. It might be, yeah, sure, no worries, I don't need them till lunchtime anyway. Sometimes the boundaries that we think are going to be the biggest asks and the things that we say that are going to be the most burdensome for people really aren't that big of a deal. You can learn that over and over again. But this, I can't ask people to do that. And it's not that big of a deal. All you've got to do is ask. And again, like we said earlier on, you might actually be giving them a gift. You might actually be allowing somebody else to step up and step in and shine. And that when you say, I'm not coping, there's something else that you do when you say, I'm a bit stressed or I'm a bit overworked. And that is you actually become a safe space for other people to admit that to. So if you think about,
very powerful, Julie.
If you are the person that is always stoic and that can manage anything and that powers through with a smile on their face and never stumbles, you're not a safe person to go to for somebody who needs to say, I'm not coping, because they might think, well, she won't understand. She's copes with anything. She'll think I'm so pathetic. But if you're able, especially if you're in a leadership position, if you're able to say, you know what, that's a bit much for me. Could one of you guys take something off my plate? Because I'm actually going to leave my desk for lunch today.
It's leadership. That's it. And if people are looking up to you and following your example, that leadership needs to take place, and people will sigh breath of relief to say, yeah, it's actually not okay. We can all see it. It's just that nobody's been saying it.
Yeah. And, it applies, and this is, I've spoken about being a stay-at-home mum who's with children, maybe there are resources amongst the people that you know or even people that you don't know yet in player groups, someone who you can say, how about instead of me being with 3 under 3, I'll be with 6 under 3 for 2 hours, then you be with 6 under 3 for 2 hours. Let me nap, let me dress, let me just get through this sink full of dishes so that I can feel a bit calmer about it. There are ways for you to ask for help. I'm not saying they're easy because they're not. None of it's easy. But yeah, if you don't do it now, then you might find yourself in a situation where your 3 children under 3 are having to be taken care of by anyone who can step in because you find yourself in hospital fighting for your life. If you don't make the decision, then the decision gets taken away from you. My decision was taken away from me.
Yeah.
When they told me I had to go into hospital, I said, well, I can't because I've got a class at my cooking school. I'm back on the radio in a week and a half. It's just not possible, so don't be ridiculous. How long would I have to go for? And the doctor lied to my face and said 2 weeks. He lied to my face. Nobody goes into the hospital for 2 weeks, not at that point, not where you've been hauled back from the brink. He lied to me to get me there. And I just said, well, it's not going to work for me, I'm sorry. And I turned around to Mick, who was sitting next to me, and he hadn't taken his eyes off my face, and he was as white as a piece of paper. And I said, tell him. And he said, it actually sounds pretty right to me.
My gosh, he's had your back the whole way.
Oh, that
poor
man.
And that's your biggest advocate for your life. Yes.
Yep. And that's when I understood that I had to just go and do it. And, of course, I was there for 6 weeks because that's how long they keep you. If they'd have said to me, you've got to go for 6 weeks, well, I mean, you wouldn't have got me there kicking and screaming. But that's what happens. If you won't take an hour out here and an hour out there somehow, some way, then you might find yourself out for 6 weeks. Or you might find yourself out for a lot longer, and you might find yourself in a situation that you can't come back from. Just this is what you want, Roz. This is what I want.
You're speaking my language, Julie. It's for mental health. It's for physical health. It's exactly the same, because if you won't take the action now, if you won't take time out to prioritise your health and look after yourself now, it does unfortunately catch up with you at some point, and it will be inconvenient at the very least.
At the very least. So, and you know what? At the very best, I'll tell you what happens. You start doing these things, the tools in your toolbox, the movement, the eating well for yourself, the time in nature, whatever it is that brought you joy as a child, that's another tool in my toolkit. So creativity, art, music, time with your family, things that bring you joy. My granddaughter, my God, she fills my heart. The things that fill you up. The opposite of that depth of despair is joy. And the opposite of that heartache is just a full and abundant life. And this is what I said to that lady who phoned me a couple of days ago. I promise you that if you do these things, and some of these things might require you to just surrender and let somebody else tell you how it needs to be. If you do these things, your life on the other side is going to be magnificent.
Julie, what you have shared today is incredible. you have fully unpacked your journey for us. You have fully given of yourself and shown the person that is listening how it is possible to step in earlier and to prevent that gradual and sudden deterioration into a fully blown crisis. Julie, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for all that you have shared. And if you are listening, you found it helpful, please share this with somebody that you love. We underestimate sometimes when we can give something, we don't know really what we're giving, but, you know, for somebody to not feel alone, to see somebody who's reached rock bottom and who has clawed their way back up and is now living a full, abundant, joyous, magnificent life, for that person to know that is possible for them, that is a gift that you can very easily give.
But I'd like to add, just because I think it's important for anyone who's going through this, or anyone who loves someone who's going through this, and I think that I've covered the whole population there, because it's wild how many people are going through it. It isn't a straight line, Ros. There's no point A to point B. It is circular. It's uphill and down dale. It is ongoing. It is a life's work. It is a life's work, and there will be 2 steps forward, 1 step back. There will be recovery and then relapse. There will be all sorts of things. But if you just hang on, it gradually and gradually gets better and better until the backslides and the relapses, they're fewer and further between. They're less severe and actually sometimes appropriate. It's appropriate to feel sad. It's appropriate to feel stressed and overwhelmed. But you see them as signals rather than as a catastrophe. So just be aware that it's a life's work, but it's a joyful life's work. It's a beautiful life's work. It's it'll give you a life that's really worth grabbing a hold of.
Thank you so much, Julie. Thank you.
Thanks, Ros.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Wellness Nurse podcast. If this conversation has helped you, please continue to look after yourself and prioritise your health like your life depends on it. And if you'd like more practical ideas on looking after your physical and mental health, check out other episodes on the Wellness Nurse channel. And there are 2 in particular you may find helpful at the moment. There's one recognising the symptoms of burnout, as well as another one on mental fitness. And I invite you to subscribe to this channel. A final disclaimer, this podcast is for general information only, and it doesn't replace a consultation with your own doctor, your psychologist or psychiatrist or other qualified health professional who knows your situation. So please seek personalised medical and mental health advice. Remember, the number for Lifeline is 13 11 14, and you don't have to be at crisis point to call them. So until next time, prioritise your health and look after you.